Sarah Martinez had always trusted too easily. As a forensic accountant, she'd built her reputation on finding truth in numbers, but she'd never expected the truth to nearly kill her. The embezzlement scheme she'd uncovered at Hartwell Industries ran deeper than she'd imagined. Millions of dollars funneled through shell companies, fake invoices, and phantom employees. What she hadn't realized was how far the conspirators would go to protect their secret. The meeting was supposed to be routine. Marcus Hartwell, the company's CFO and her longtime friend, had asked her to come to the remote construction site after hours to discuss sensitive findings away from corporate offices. She should have been suspicious when she arrived at the desolate plot of land outside town, where foundation work for a new facility had been abandoned months ago. "Sarah, I'm sorry it's come to this," Marcus had said, his face pale in the twilight. Behind him, two men emerged from the shadows, hired muscle with cold eyes and callous hands. The shovel struck her head before she could run. As consciousness faded, she heard Marcus's voice, distant and regretful, make it look like she disappeared. No body means no murder charges. But Sarah wasn't dead. Not yet. She awoke to suffocating darkness and the weight of earth pressing down on her chest. Panic seized her as she realized where she was. Buried alive in a makeshift grave, perhaps 3 feet deep, just enough to hide a body, but hastily dug and the criminals rushed to cover their tracks. The wooden boards above her head groaned under the dirt's weight. Someone had constructed a crude coffin from construction scraps, leaving just enough airspace to prolong her agony. Her hands were bound, her mouth taped, but her legs were free. In their overconfidence or inexperience, her captors had made critical mistakes. Sarah forced herself to think like the investigator she was.
But the
She had
dog
perhaps hours
refuses
before
to
the
give
air
up.
ran out.
It
The
knows
boards
it
above
must
were old
protect
lumber,
its
weakened by
territory,
weather.
its master,
Using her knees and what
even
little
if it
leverage she could
means
manage,
sacrificing
she began
itself.
working at the makeshift lid. Splinter by splinter, time became meaningless in the absolute darkness. Her fingernails broke as she clawed at the tape around her wrists, using protruding nail in the wood to saw through the bonds. When her hands came free, she nearly sobbed with relief. The mouth tape followed, and she could finally take deeper breaths of the stale air. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes that felt like hours. Just as despair began to overwhelm her, she heard something that made her heart race. Scratching sounds from above, different from the settling earth. Then came a sound she'd never thought she'd be so grateful to hear, a dog's whine. Rex was a border collie with an insatiable curiosity and a nose that had gotten him into trouble more times than his owner, Tom Brennan, could count. The 3-year-old dog had wandered off in the ranch house again, following scent trails across the scrubland that bordered the abandoned construction site. The unusual disturbance in the earth caught Rex's attention first. Fresh dirt in a neat rectangle, so different from the natural landscape. But it was the scent underneath that made him whine and begin digging frantically. Human, alive, afraid. Sarah heard the digging intensify above her. She began pounding on the wooden boards with both fists, shouting as loudly as her strained voice would allow. "Help! Help me! I'm down here!" The dog's barking grew more frantic. Then she heard a human voice, rough with concern and disbelief. "What the hell? Rex! Get back!" Tom Brennan had followed his dog's urgent barking across the fields, expecting to find him pestering a rabbit or prairie dog. Instead, he found Rex digging furiously what looked like a grave,
it must
whimpering
make a
and looking back at
choice.
Tom as if to say,
Either face
"Hurry!
the creature
Hello?
and die,
Is someone
or
there?"
run and
Tom
hide,
called out,
hoping
feeling
it's
foolish,
not too
but
late
unable to ignore his
save
dog's
its
behavior.
master's soul.
"Yes,
But
help me.
which
I'm
path
buried.
will the loyal
Please."
animal choose?
Sarah's voice was muffled but unmistakably human and desperate. Tom ran back to his truck for a shovel, his mind reeling. In 20 minutes of frantic digging, he and Rex had uncovered enough of the makeshift coffin to pry off the boards. Sarah's dirt-streaked face appeared in his flashlight beam, and she gasped as fresh night air flooded her prison. 3 days later, Sarah sat in the sheriff's office, her voice steady despite the bandages on her hands and the haunted look that would take months to fade from her eyes. Across from her, Detective Williams took notes as she detailed the embezzlement scheme and the attempted murder that followed her discovery. "The accounts I traced are still active," she explained, spreading out photocopies of documents she'd hidden in her home safe. Marcus and his accomplices are still moving money. Thinking I'm dead. If you move quickly, you can catch them in the act. Rex lay at her feet, having refused to leave her side since Tom brought them both to the hospital. The rancher had become an unlikely hero, and his dog an even more unlikely savior. The local news had picked up the story. Rancher's dog saves woman buried alive by embezzlers. The arrests came that evening. Marcus Hartwell broke down when confronted with the evidence, his guilt overwhelming whatever loyalty he'd felt to his co-conspirators. The two hired men were found in a motel outside town, still carrying the shovels used to dig Sarah's grave. As Sarah watched the news coverage from Tom's ranch house, he'd insisted she stay until she felt ready to return to her own home. She reached down to scratch Rex behind the ears. The border collie looked up at her with intelligent brown eyes, tail wagging gently. "You saved my life," she whispered to him. "I'll never forget that." Tom appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "Rex has always been good at finding things," he said with a slight smile. "But I think this might be his most important discovery." Sarah nodded, understanding that she'd found something too. Not just her life, but renewed faith in the unexpected kindness of strangers and the loyalty of a dog who wouldn't give up when it mattered most. Justice would be served, but more importantly, she was alive to see it happen. Marcus Hartwell and his accomplices would spend the next decade in prison, but Sarah Martinez would spend her remaining years knowing that sometimes salvation comes from most unlikely sources. A curious dog, and a rancher willing to trust his pet's instincts over common sense. Rex, for his part, got extra treats for the rest of his life and never knew he was a hero. He only knew that when someone needed help, you kept digging until you found them.